Hello, fellow physicians. The latest studies show physicians in the United States are burned out as high as 54%. This is a new, more recent study by Medscape that shows this. In addition, physician suicide is increasing at alarming rates. So, in today's video, we're going to be talking about um, burnout, what it is, some higher level things you can do, and how you can distinguish this from depression. If you're new to the channel, my name is Ron Wiest, and I've spent the last 34 years as a psychiatrist, uh, not only treating patients, but treating physicians with burnout and depression. Um, I'm helping physicians in the second half of my career really to help them move towards living their best life. So let's jump into it and talk about more about burnout and depression. So, as stated, about 54% of physicians are uh, uh, surveyed were identified themselves as being burnt out. Physician suicide is significantly on the rise. About 400 physicians annually commit suicide. This is more than a whole medical school class. 40%, I'm sorry, uh, physicians have a 40% higher suicide rate for males than the general population. And for females, 130% of the general population. In my opinion, this is likely because of the added responsibilities women have um, uh, at home and in the family, and balancing these roles. The consequences of physician burnout for patients is obviously added medical errors or an increase in medical errors, poor patient satisfaction, and on the physician side, it's increased rates of disability, whether that's depression, anxiety, substance abuse, diminished productivity from physicians, and then higher turnover and attrition rates for physicians who are now leaving the field. It's estimated that the cost of replacing one physician, when you look at the expense of starting that person and then starting a new person, loss of productivity, is right around $1 million for each physician. So, um, the treatments for burnout are looking at what are the systemic issues that cause burnout to begin with. Unfortunately, um, most of the efforts to try to treat physician burnout are really directed towards, rather than identifying and changing systemic issues, it's really looking at physician resiliency and how physicians can better cope with the stresses and strains that this um, ever-changing medical field currently has. So, what is burnout? Just in layman's terms, burnout is really trying to achieve a goal and trying harder and harder, but not being able to achieve that goal. And I have news for you: the cavalry isn't coming. No one's going to save physicians other than the physicians themselves. And we need to learn and be clear that we have to rely on ourselves to manage this issue. So let's define burnout in more explicit terms, the definition of burnout really has three components with it. The first is emotional exhaustion, that physicians just feel like they're depleted. The second is depersonalization, where there used to be a real connection between physician and patients. Now physicians feel somewhat disconnected from their patients and a sense of cynicism about their work. And the last is a reduced sense of personal accomplishment and joy that physicians have in doing their work. The gold standard for this is really a self-report scale called the MBI, which is the Malish Burnout Inventory. It's available online and it's considered the gold standard for physicians. So really, there are two treatments of burnout. One is a psychological treatment, and that is if you can't achieve your goal, you either have to change or realign your goal. And the second is if you can't achieve your goal, you've got to change your strategy or methodology that you're using to attain the goal. So it's really that simple. And I'm going to be adding a third treatment, which I think physicians are at times uncomfortable to discuss, which is making more money. And so by making more money, that can allow physicians to either reduce their time and spend more time doing other things. But by reducing time and increasing income, these are things that really can significantly help burnout in the experience I've had with patients. So we've talked about changing goals. So I want to give you an example of this. I worked in a maximum security prison as a resident moonlighting, and essentially they asked me to see 4 patients an hour. In a maximum security prison, you're seeing patients who have really, committed the most serious of crimes, murder, um, etc. And so I found that I didn't have adequate time to spend with people. Frequently, if I did believe people needed a medicine, uh, the medicines weren't available. So I felt quite demoralized and started to get burned out in doing this job. So what I had to do is change my goal. And a lot of us don't think about it, but I know my goal was to try to develop or try to be performing excellent patient care, but I couldn't do it. So in this setting, so I had to realign my goals with the realities of this um, job that I have. So I said, in order to be doing excellent patient care, I needed to find one way I could add value to the patient's life in almost every encounter that I had, whether it was psychological value or diagnosing depression and treating depression or helping keep somebody safe. That's how I did it. So I aligned my goal with the values that were most important to me, and I was able to achieve that in almost every encounter that I had with the inmates. Frequently, the inmates aren't listened to by the guards, by administration, and just even the act of listening was meaningful from the prisoner's point of view. So that's an example of changing your goals or realigning your goals. Now for a change in strategy or methodology. This is more clear cut and straightforward. There was a book that was written it was called From Good to Great. I know physicians really focus on being excellent in almost everything they do. And it's this perfectionism, I think, that tends to create unhappiness. So in the book From Good to Great, they were talking about how good is the enemy of great. I think with physicians, it's almost the opposite. Uh, Being great or trying to be great at everything almost interferes with being uh, uh, competent and happy at times. And so finding a way to address and change your strategy is very important. So, what are examples of this? Um, you can shadow another physician who is not burned out and see how they go about organizing their day. Frequently um, charting is a big issue. Learning how to chart with Dragon Dictate or another um, type of program that can help more efficient charting. Using different templates can be very helpful in the charts that we use that help you do this in a more efficient way. Discussing with patients that you're going to need to chart during the end of the session because it's critical that one, you practice what you preach and being healthy, and two, you get the information down that's so important in the patient's lives in the chart so that you can track all of this. You can also keep your hours on the lower side. Obviously, in any organization that you work, it has to be a win for the organization, but you can do this within the context of not being burnt out. And that's how you can change your strategy. Lastly, we'll talk about the difference between burnout and the condition of depression. So, as we said, in burnout, there's emotional exhaustion, there is depersonalization or feeling disconnected from patients, and a reduced sense of personal accomplishment and joy at work. Whereas depression, when we look at functional imaging scans of the brain, we can see that there is reduced energy along with the symptoms in the pathway that appears to be controlling mood and these other symptoms in depression. So, what are those symptoms? So, the symptoms of depression are sad mood, low energy, low motivation, not just at work, but in general, diminished concentration, decreased memory, a sense of distortion in thinking marked by hopelessness, helplessness, and lower self esteem in general. And then you can see hypothalamic type symptoms with change in sleep, change in appetite, and then in the most serious cases, suicidal thoughts, which is where it's critical to get professional help as soon as you can, because depression can be clearly helped, and the treatment is very different than the treatment for uh, burnout. Um, anyway, in the next uh, stream we're going to do, I'm going to be discussing more about depression and understanding if you're depressed. This is Ron Wiest, and I'm signing out.